Oh, here we go, going, here we go. Oh, well, it looks like everything's working. How are you today? I am your Saturday night. Welcome to your Saturday night. Oh, doing a little relax. Sit back. The armor's over there, or at least most of it. I am still wearing the chainmail. I still have my bracers on. And we are gonna have some fun tonight. At least I think we will. Mm. So, it's a Leif Erikson double feature. And in case you don't know about Leif Erikson Day, we're going to talk about it just a little bit, the importance of it, and what all this stuff around me is. Hey, Silver Fox, how are you doing today? I got some fun going on. We have our drinking horn. We're going to talk about a few interesting things today. It is it is Saturday night and we are happy, but it is also Leif Erikson Day, amongst a few other things. But we're going to focus on Leif Erikson Day, and we have a double feature lined up, and that double feature is going to be pretty fun. We're going to start off. We're going to talk about a little bit of history and the importance of Leif Erikson Day, who Leif Erikson is, and what all this stuff around me means. Uh, and we're going to actually cover a couple other fun facts that I found while doing my research for this particular show. Because it was there was a few things I saw today that surprised me. uh, I'm the type of person, I like to go ahead. I take my time to research what I want to talk about, um, and in that research, I'm going ahead and I'm doing research up until when I come to you. And there's a lot of benefit to actually going ahead and doing your research right up until the moment that you go ahead to talk about the topic. Number one, it's fresh in your mind. Number two, you never know what you can learn even right before you want to talk about it. There are all sorts of interesting things to talk about today, but first off, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But first off, I have to share something that's really interesting that is Viking related, but it doesn't have anything to do with Leif Erikson. And this is just kind of cool. So, in the study of history, we come across all sorts of interesting tidbits of things that appear in the world in places where, as far as we know, they shouldn't be there. However, dating to the time when the Vikings and the Norsemen and the Nordic peoples were using drinking horns, about over 1,000 years ago. Apparently, there were some drinking horns that were found in Korea that date to around the same time. And that's just interesting and very cool. Because the drinking horn was it was in many ways not widespread as far as cultural use And these drinking horns are very decorated, and there's only a few of them, but somehow a few of them ended up in Korea around the same time in history that the Vikings and the Nordic peoples were also using drinking horns. And because the Nordic people, the Vikings, which people think about them as many things, but first and foremost, you should consider Vikings to be explorers. They did do a lot of other stuff, which is questionable, and that's not what we're going to talk about today. But they made it a lot. They made it pretty far across, to them, what was the known world. And to just think that around the same period of time that Vikings were using drinking horns, that they also ended up showing up in what would have been the, ancient Korea, as it were. It's kind of interesting. It's curious. Really curious. Now, before I get too far off, you're actually going to see next to me a couple of monuments from a couple different countries to Leif Erikson. And these are statues from a couple of different spots in the world. I will have to check because I now can't remember exactly where these are from, but there's actually a lot of statues of Leif Erikson. There's statues actually even in Boston of Leif Erikson. There's statues in Iceland. There's statues in Greenland. There's statues in Newfoundland, and a lot of other places that, for various reasons, fondly remember him. And up over here in this corner, we have a very basic map. Down here, we have another map we're going to talk about that's a little more specific. And then behind me, we actually have a more old world map. Happy Saturday, Veg Rocker. So, before I get off topic, Leif Erikson and his exploration was not as far and wide as some might assume, but he did manage to do something which ended up getting written about quite extensively in his homeland. And they call it the Vinland Saga, or the Vinlander Saga. They also call it the Greenlander Saga. And there is a slowly mounting amount of evidence that suggests it's all true. And more than that, we're finding lots of remnants of Norse settlers and travelers in North America. Now, somewhere around the year 1000, Leif Erikson landed in a place which he called Vinland. And Vinland, actually, if you can look up at that map, you can see that Vinland is slightly southwest of Greenland, according to this map. And all of our current understanding would actually put Leif Erikson's landing point, the mythical Vinland, as Newfoundland in Canada. So first off, let's just think about how cool that is. That in the year 1000, or roughly therein, the Norse people made landing in North America. Now, this other map I have here is actually twofold. Now, part of this map is actually this part that I'm pointing at right now. That is actually the exploration of Eric the Red, who was Leif Erikson's father. And then up over here, this other arrow. Nope, wrong way. Even I get confused still sometimes. And then, oh, whoa, that's weird. My hand just went away. The other line from Greenland over to North America, that's Leif Erikson's Journey as We Understand It. Now, we're going to discuss a few other things about this, but it really is all very interesting, and history is full of surprises and things that sometimes we do not foresee. And some of those things rewrite our understanding about what history is, and or how history unfolded. And it is very important to understand how history actually went. As they say, if you do not learn from the past, you could be doomed to repeat it. But on a more positive note, a much more positive note, understanding the great wide journey which has brought us to where we are now can better inform us about how we should proceed into our future. Cheers. Now, I do have a couple fun little things that I'd at least like to mention because they are actually quite interesting in many ways. Now, the saga of the Vinlander, also the Greenlander saga, and then sometimes referred to as the sagas of Icelanders. I know this gets confusing, but don't worry. Leif Erikson actually landed 3 times with his exploration party after they left Greenland. And those places make up his journey. Now, Vinland was the last place he landed, and after arriving in Vinland, they ended up spending the winter there. Now, they stayed until the winter ended. As soon as the winter ended enough, they went back to Greenland, and Leif Erikson never again returned to this new place. Now I have to see how to pronounce this word, so do forgive me. Now, in their actual exploration, when they got to Vinland, they encountered people there. Which I do not know how to pronounce this word. Skalagari is what they called them. And that pronunciation is probably incorrect. It's probably incorrect. But there were some hostilities, and that is one of several reasons that Leif Erikson never returned to Vinland. And that's an interesting difference compared to other stories of peoples from Europe who come to the Americas in early history. Leif Erikson and his exploration party, they made landing 3 times in North America. They encountered hostilities with the people who lived there, and then more or less said, we're done, we're going home. Which I find curious in many ways, because there's portions of the story which I don't know, and portions we'll never know, but it would be so very fun to know more of the reasoning and more of what went on. Because, of course, we only have so many accounts and so many records of Leif Erikson, his trip, his travels, and where he went. And in many ways, a lot is unknown. And those unknowns, they make it a fun mystery. And history is full of mysteries. Histories, mysteries. And those mysteries, they just tickle at your mind. Now, there is, of course, a great deal that we do know about Leif Erikson and his travels. And then there's a great deal we don't know. Now, Leif Erikson, we have a rough idea how old he was, and that he actually passed away some 19 or so years, or 19 to 20 years after going to Vinland. We know Leif Erikson's father was Eric the Red, also a great Norse explorer, and of course I use the term great very loosely because of course Eric the Red made it to Greenland. But there's also of course the fact that we know that Leif Erikson had a son, but we don't know anything about his line after that I'm aware of. And if you know any additional information, please feel free to add it in, because there's always room to conversate, and there's always room to learn, and there's always room to know more. Now, Leif Erikson was also called Leif the Lucky, but lucky is not necessarily the same meaning there. But it does have similar implications, but it does more reference specific things like travel and battle and such like that. I have to have all my notes pulled up, you know? Gotta keep your notes up, right? Keep your notes where you can see them. And I like to have notes. Oh. Now, if I can find... you'll have to give me just one moment because I've lost something. And it is actually very important. Now, besides all of this, and besides getting to kind of see the path unwind before us, we can see how this really does. It really does change our understanding, at least in some ways, of European exploration, colonization, and the path forward on that. Now, as far as we're aware, no one else for almost 500 years from Europe went to North America. But there was at least an understanding that it was there. And we also can't deny that with exploration does come a certain level of hostility. And it does follow with a lot of explorers. We don't need to break it down very much, but many explorers who look for new lands, new places, new worlds, hostilities do come up. And if hostilities don't come up, well, other things come up. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Now, I know I have this saved. Been saving all sorts of fun stuff all day. Oh, coming with the noodles! Now, the reason for actually choosing today specifically, October the 9th, for Leif Erikson Day has a more modern reasoning. In the 1800s, I believe it was 1825, a ship of Nordic immigrants arrived in New York Harbor. And on the Resurgence, I believe. And it just so happened that this first wave of what would be the beginning of Norse immigrants into the United States of America was on October 9th. So on October 9th, when this happened, this was the first wave of Norse immigrants to come to the U.S. Obviously, almost 800 years after Leif Erikson had been here. But in honor of those first immigrants, those first Norse immigrants to come to the United States of America, that is actually why we celebrate Leif Erikson Day on October 9th. We have no way of knowing when Leif Erikson himself actually arrived in Vinland. We only have a rough approximation of the year. Due to that fact, there's a lot which is unknown, but it is worth at least recognizing who would have been the first European explorer to ever get here. But it's also important in many other ways. So those first Norse families, those first Nordic families who immigrated into the U.S., those represent early Americans, or at least early citizens of the United States, and our burgeoning immigrant culture at that time. The bulk of citizens of the colonies, and then eventually the United States of America, are of course immigrants. And with that, you have to recognize each of the groups. So we will have just a moment to raise a horn to those, I believe it was 11 families that came to the United States of America in the 1800s, who would be the first Norse immigrants we got. So we'll raise a horn and we'll have a drink for them. Now, we will press further on, because there are other interesting points to this that are worth talking about. Very interesting points. Or at least, very interesting to me. Now, Leif Erikson himself ended up returning to Greenland after landing in Vinland, which we believe is Newfoundland, though some people do believe it could potentially have been Nova Scotia, or what would have been potentially Massachusetts. And that is questionable, but that is also why there is a statue of Leif Erikson in Boston. Because we are unsure where Vinland actually was. Now, having found one Norse settlement or at least evidence of one in Newfoundland, it could have been one of the 3 landing points that Leif Erikson made in North America. It doesn't necessarily make it Vinland, but it does make it at least worth considering it could be, though there is some belief that potentially Vinland could have been further south. And if that's the case, well, then Leif Erikson might have landed closer to what would have been the future home of the United States. What we do know is he landed in one place that he called Markland, another place that he called Vinland, and then one place that he called Hollandland. And again, if my pronunciations are incorrect, I do apologize. So I'm doing my best with the words as I can read them and as I know them. What we also know is based on these words, Markland, Markland um, meant forest land, and Vinland meant Vineland. And because Vinland means Vineland, it does open up a lot of question as to where that could be. And Markland being forest land, again, opens up question. And Newfoundland does have forests. So, could the Newfoundland settlement have been Markland or Vinland? And it's worth questioning. As we learn more and more, hopefully, eventually, we'll have a proper answer to this. The only place that we do actually have an answer on is Baffin Island, right here. Let me see if I can. I can't properly show you, but all right. If you look at my map, you're going to see Baffin Island over there. And that one is actually at least mostly agreed upon to be the first landing point. Or Hololand. With that in mind, there is a good understanding of where we believe the first landing point of the 3 landing points was, which is Baffin Island. The other 2 landing points are very questionable, though at least one of them can be narrowed down to have been in Newfoundland. And I know I'm talking on and on, reiterating, but there is some confusion, misunderstanding, and a lack of true understanding. So misunderstanding, that's a little redundant, but if I'll carry on. Now, for the most part, the Norse did not, or Nordic peoples did not keep incredibly good written records. However, later in their history, once we actually get to what would have been the income of Christianity, they do start keeping better records because they began writing in variations of Norman and Latin and whatnot. And due to that, they did start keeping better records, though all the records we have of early Norse peoples are occasional writings of runes on stone or in bark. And you can see why that makes things a little difficult. Though rune stones themselves dot the European landscape. And runes have actually been found all the way over to Constantinople. So we do know that the Norse peoples got pretty far in the world. Of course, remnants from archaeological digs in places like Finland and Iceland do show things such as silks, which by all accounts would have originated somewhere in either Eurasia or Southern Asia. But we don't have really any artifacts except for the one settlement in Newfoundland to give us much more information about how long the Norse actually were here, how long Leif Erikson's people were actually here, and what kind of impact they actually made. And all of this I love the mystery. And I hope you do too. And if at any point in time you have questions, please feel free to ask. Now, we are doing this as a double feature tonight, so I'm going to let you know what we're actually going to be doing, and I'm going to properly explain this right now. We're going to be talking about Leif Erikson for a little bit, and then we're going to have a wonderful little intermission, and during that intermission, you go ahead, you have yourself a breather, get up, you walk around in circles, and when you come back, we're going to get together, we're going to have a different kind of Viking fun, which is playing Valheim. Because you have to have Viking fun on Leif Erikson Day. And I will also state one of the other reasons that the 9th of October was chosen was to usurp and come before a certain other European who made it to the Americas. If you couldn't guess. Of course, in honor of Leif Erikson's father, Eric the Red, I have this wonderful red nail polish today. Which brings us to another just interesting thing that I would like to mention, which is in Norse names. Your second name is the name of your father, then followed by what you are. So, thank you so much. Thank you very much. So, Leif Erikson, of course, his father was Eric the Red, but Leif did actually have a sister, and her name, if I can find it right here, Freydis Eriksdotter, and he had a couple other siblings. So that's actually an interesting naming convention that's part of Norse culture. So whoever your father was, your second name was his name, followed by whether you're the son or the daughter. So Leif Erikson, his sister Freder Eriksdotter, and thank you very much. And then, of course, Leif Erikson himself had a son, and his son was Thorgis Leifsson. So you can kind of understand this history, which in some ways makes it easy, and in other ways makes it very difficult sometimes to properly track families and lineage in Norse society. I do not know if this continues, but if it does, it's very interesting. And it does have similarities with other cultures in the surrounding Northern European area, where your second name was usually letting people know you were the son or daughter of. Now, to continue on with all of this fun, all of this interest, you know, there is a great deal to be said in regards to how Leif Erikson Day is really just another day to honor the various immigrants that have come to the New World. And it is important that we remember that, you know, the United States of America is built by generations of immigrants. We all came from somewhere. Very few of us actually came from North America. Or at least our lines, very few of our lines came from North America. So in that respect, I do want to, of course, give a reminder that we are approaching also Indigenous Peoples Day, and that's coming up. And important to remember that our families, or at least many of our families, not necessarily all of our families, but many of us descend from immigrants to North America. And it's always important to both honor where we originally came from, or where our families originally came from, and also to honor that concept that we are a nation of immigrants. In one way or another, most of us, many of us, have a lot of thanks to give to the generations that came before us who embarked on their own journeys to come here. So once more, we'll raise a horn. However, Leif Erikson was not all sunshine and happiness. Most certainly not. One of the jobs he was actually given when he was sent off. Okay, we'll raise that horn one more time just because you said something. Leif Erikson was also charged with an additional duty. He was converted to Christianity in Iceland before being sent to more or less take over his father's work. And a portion of the work was actually to bring Christianity to other Norse settlements. Feel a little conflicted about that. However, that's only because goes right along with the other things that happen when you're an explorer. Cultural exchange is fine, but sometimes the exchange can be a little rough. And as you'll notice, in one of those statues, Leif is wearing chainmail, much like myself, and carrying a rather large axe. Take a moment just to acknowledge that. Now, Leif Erikson himself, I can't tell you whether or not he was one kind or the other kind of bringer of Christianity to the Norse colonies. Well, what I can say is Leif Erikson went back to Greenland after leaving Vinland, and then took over as chieftain, and reigned over Greenland until his death, somewhere around 1020. I'm being vague and you're confused. Completely understandable. I'm trying to be very polite. Though to be a little more direct, I can't say with any certainty or historical accuracy whether or not Leif Erikson's bringing of Christianity to Greenland and to the lands that he went to was brutal or kind. But nonetheless, there are a lot of statues that depict him carrying a large axe and wearing armor. Again, much like the one up here. Oh, over there, I mean. Can't be certain. It is a very it is a very common outfit for Norse peoples, but it's also a very common war outfit. Now, this picture here, the lower one, where Leif is actually just wearing a tunic and several layers of underclothing, this would be more for exploring, more for daily life. And the carrying of weapons was not always normal. There's a great deal of variety in history, so the carrying of weapons, it wasn't necessarily always there. There were a lot of differences and a lot of traits, but it should be stated that that axe that's in this statue, that is specifically a war axe. Whereas if Leif was just shown carrying something like an arming sword or a small sword, that might be daily wear and common and normal to see. Yes. That's actually usually referred to as a Dane axe. And a Dane axe with that really long handle, that gives you additional leverage and capacity to injure another man, whether they're wearing armor or not. So yes, that's specifically a war axe. And yeah, so yes, that's a good point. Common folk don't necessarily know, so it is good to explain these things further. Though I also don't want to overextend what I know. Actually, no, that is most certainly not for a tree, and there's a number of reasons which I can point out. The first one actually being the length of the handle. As you can see, it's actually long enough that Leif Erikson could have, well, he could have used it as a crutch if he wanted to. That length is specifically for a kind of leverage you only need in war. The second is actually, you'll notice, it has a trait, they usually refer to this as a bearded axe also, and you'll notice that the end of this axe is actually quite wide, and actually comes down quite far. That kind of edge, you lose a lot of energy that you would need to focus if you wanted to cut wood. So you'll notice that a lot of wood cutting axes actually have smaller ends, and they're usually quite wide and wedge-like. And this is incredibly common across history with many different types of axes. Now, when you have a much larger, essentially edge on an axe like this, that is almost entirely designed for hitting something soft and fleshy for maximum damage. Now, the length of the haft or the handle gives you additional leverage, but it also gives you additional reach. That reach is very important in combat. You want to keep your enemy as far away as possible, and you also want to be able to use that haft as a defensive measure. So that's defensive, it gives you reach, it gives you additional leverage in case you need it, and then the axe head is more designed for dealing with a slightly softer target than something like wood. So the entire idea also of that hook, it can be used to hook limbs, it can be used to hook shields, weapons, it can be used in less pleasant ways. So yes. So yes, that's specifically a war axe. You'll also notice that in both statues, he's wearing a helmet. Let's see if I can actually make that more evident. Just give me one moment, and I will try to make it a little clearer. All right. So now if you can actually see the head right here, so that's a helmet, which an explorer probably wouldn't need to be wearing. Ooh, now let's see if I can get this back where it goes. Oh, alright. What we're going to do is we're just going to stick that there. Hey, look! Much bigger now. Oh, and now you can actually see properly the cross. And I don't think I need to make the other picture larger, because in the other picture also, you will notice that Leif Erikson is wearing a helmet. And though there is a great deal of martial prowess and martial culture in Norse culture, some of these things you don't need for your day-to-day life. You especially don't need them if you're just sailing and exploring. And you most certainly don't need them if you're going on a relatively peaceful boat voyage from Iceland to Greenland to take over for your dad. But I'm very happy to clarify, and I will share whatever I do know in any way, shape, and form I can to help paint a better picture. And should anyone be watching this now or on the replay or when I upload it later on YouTube, if you would like to add in any additional clarifying information or corrections, because I always welcome corrections and I always welcome clarifying information, please feel free, as your opinion is very much appreciated, as well as your facts. I will take any facts, learning, and education in any way I can. And the more I know, or the more I learn, the better that I can present and provide for all of you. Now, we're going to go ahead, we're going to set the horn down for a moment. And here's where we can go ahead and get into just one other thing that I really want to talk about. And it makes sense to talk about it now on Leif Erikson Day, because Leif Erikson, of course, was a Norse explorer, and the various things that the Norse people did, you know, we have a very specific image in our mind of a Viking, and we usually even depict them in our visual media and our books and our comics and our cartoons and all over the place as conquerors and people who just came in and did awful things, which by and large is very unfair to paint an entire culture as if they were all Vikings, as if they were all raiders. Personally, I think that it's a disservice to the truth of our cultural diversity and to the great variety of different peoples that exist in the world. The Norse people were vilified in so many ways. And to that end, I would actually like to talk about Norse exploration and some of the great things the Norse people did. Now, there are a number of different articles and there are a number of different studies and archaeological studies, which of course can all point towards a great deal of different things that are actually related to the Norse peoples. But one of the things that I'd actually like to talk about right now is the influence that the Norse people actually had in a very real way. Now, something that a lot of people don't realize is that the Norse settled and traded with a lot of the people that they supposedly raided. More important than that, though there were Viking raiders, this is a reality. This is not just a fable or a myth. I mean, there were Viking raiders, but there was a large number of Norse traders and people who studied. There were they had their own very interesting and deep mystical faith and culture. They had their own language. They had their own writing system. They actually had a huge trade route. A lot of northern Scotland and northern Scottish peoples are actually descended from Norse people who also intermarried with Celts and Gaels and additional peoples. So they had kings and they had culture and they had cities and they had trade. They had art. I can't show it to you, but actually on my back I have a tattoo of Yggdrasil and a number of the Futhark, which are runes. And Yggdrasil is the world tree. It's actually their idea of the cosmos. And the Futhark, that was their written language. And the Scottish people that I descend from actually descend from a combination of Norse and Gaelic people. So for me personally, it's wrong to paint a singular image of the Norse as they were all Vikings and they were all raiders, when in truth they were building ships and reaching North America half a millennium before anyone else in Europe. When they were actually sailing down to Africa and doing trade there, and there's a great deal of evidence to show that they were in Africa doing trade there. When the Norse peoples actually went as far as reaching the Mediterranean, but they also reached as far as Turkey, and they reached the Middle East. The Norse people were a very interesting culture in and to themselves, and we know surprisingly little about their true history, as much of it was wiped away in the 700s, the 900s, the 1000s, the 1300s. A lot of Norse culture was wiped from the face of the earth, destroyed wholesale, or rewritten. And though in some ways Norse culture in a very modern 21st century way is still painted in a villainous way, we are starting to change our point of view, to change our viewpoint, and to change the way we talk about Vikings, Scandinavians, Norse and Nordic peoples. And we're starting to understand more and more about where they went, how they lived, and the impact they actually had on our current world and the culture of their time as well. Just to know that drinking horns somehow made it all the way to Korea when you didn't even have landline phones or proper roads that would get you to Korea from Northern Europe. Gives you an idea of how far culture spread. Now, in some ways, we have questions still to ask. And Leif Erikson is just an example, one example of a Norse individual, a Nordic individual, who is well deserving of receiving his due, and not just having a day to remember Leif Erikson, but a day to remember what his people actually accomplished. And not just paint with a broad stroke an entire culture as savages, which is often what happens with the Norse and the Vikings. Now, I do apologize. I went on for a while about that. But I would like to thank you for being here for this first part. This is going to conclude my talk on Leif Erikson Day. And once more, if you're watching this on the replay, or if you're watching this later when I've uploaded it to YouTube, I encourage any sharing of knowledge or anything to either clarify, rectify, or expand our understanding of this subject and my understanding of this subject. And I'd be more than happy to come back and have a discussion again about this should more information come along. And I fully plan on doing another video next Leif Erikson Day. So, thank you so much. What I'm actually going to be doing now is I'm going to be taking a short intermission. And when I return to you, we're going to be playing Valheim to celebrate this wonderful day of Vikings. And of course, I'm about to play a game that plays into all those stereotypes that I just talked about. But we have a lot of fun, don't we? Thank you, Silver Fox, for being here. Thank you for everyone else who's been here. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn on that intermission. And I will be back shortly. And we're going to have some more fun. I've had a great time.